Today we're going to give you an update on the clutch for the Jeep Comanche, so stay tuned. So to get this bell housing off, we need to pull the slave cylinder and throwout bearing out. So we've got to pull this little push knot off right there. I'm going to just use a screwdriver and pry it out. The kit comes with a new one. All right, so then take your rubber grommet and push it outwards, because you're going to have to remove it to get the throwout bearing out, and it is split from the factory to be able to do that. You see? And once you get that grommet out and that little push nut off, this thing should just slide out. Boy, this is loose. This transmission has seen better days. I do not believe this is the factory throwout bearing, because I think the factory throwout bearings do not have these little zip tie things on them as what comes with a new one or an aftermarket. Okay, there were 9 of these 13mm bolts. These things were extremely tight. Had to use a breaker bar to get them. So you got to take those 9, and this transmission should separate from that bell housing. And with a few whacks of a dead blow hammer, it did separate. All right, got the old bell housing on the rebuilt one. That was fairly easy. All right, don't make the same mistake I did. I've got this, right angle Milwaukee impact. It's really nice for getting up in tight areas. But I used a chrome socket. This is one of my old Craftsman USA, and it split it. And I don't really have any impact rated 3/8, so I'm going to try to either manhandle it with a 1/2 inch or go buy some 3/8 impact sockets. Okay, I managed to break them loose with this 1/2 inch impact, but something concerns me because this bolt here has a different size head. So I'm hoping the threads are the same and it didn't strip out. If it stripped out, then I'm gonna have to buy a new flywheel. Hopefully they just changed this clutch and lost a bolt. Let me see what happens. So it looks like the threads are the same, just the head is different. All right, let's see here. Doesn't look too worn out. Okay, I wanted to remove the protection plate, and in order to do that I had to remove the flywheel. Let me show you. Alright, so when you remove the flywheel, you get a little bit better access to that pilot bearing in there, and then of course I get to look at all the gunk. Now might be a really good time to change the oil pan gasket and the oil pump while I'm under here, because I have all this access. So I'm going to chew on that, and I might do that. See, I have a really bad oil leak coming from the back of that valve cover, so we're going to get hopefully all this cleaned up. All right, what I decided to do is go ahead and change this oil pan and rear main seal while I'm got all this out. So this is how I supported the motor, just on one side. I mean, it's supported by the motor mounts on both sides, so it's really not dangerous. It just kind of holds it up to keep the back end from touching the firewall. So now what I'm going to do is drain the oil and remove the oil pan gasket. So this new rebuilt unit came with this little seal tied to it, and I didn't really know what it was for, but I think I figured it out. But also note, it says that it needs synchro mesh, so this company really wants you to use synchro mesh fluid in it. All right, so a lot of stuff I did today that didn't film, but because there's plenty of footage out there on how to do this. But so I pulled the oil pan off, and I put a new oil pump and changed the rear main seal, and then cleaned all the sludge up and stuff that was on the back of this motor before I put the flywheel back on. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to do when, so I didn't want to go ahead and put the transmission back in without doing all that. This was real easy when the transmission is out. I'm going to try to resurface, just scuff up this flywheel a little bit. I got some chatter sign right here. You don't really feel it, but you can see it. That's kind of concerning, that green mark. I wonder if this is a junkyard flywheel. The reason I say that is this flywheel's been removed before, because these are your flywheel bolts, but you know, they're hardened steel. You can see the little tick marks on the bolts, but this one is not, and this one was on there with a couple of washers. So it's kind of concerning. I'm going to have to source another one of these, and you can see these are kind of rounded. So this clutch has definitely been removed before. All right, I'm to the point. I'm going to try to pull that pilot bearing out. And again, as you saw earlier, I got this slide hammer from AutoZone, free rental, and this device here is a pilot bearing puller. So we're going to give it a few whacks and see what happens. And that's what that little thing looks like when it comes out. Well, be careful when you pull that out, because that was just the interior part. This is the exterior part, and if you look, the little race has some indentions so your puller can dig into it. These were the original bolts, grade 8. So I went to Ace Hardware and got a set of new ones. These are a little bit bigger, but they do fit perfectly. The other ones, the ends are all worn out, and they actually had just a regular non-graded bolt in there also. What I did was I used just a random orbital sander, first at 180 grit and then at 220, and then just took the glaze off of this flywheel. And what you're looking for is any discolored hot spots. So this flywheel is in really good shape. I don't see any discolored hot spots. There's no cracks or anything on it. So we're going to use that. You can't even feel the lip to where the clutch disc was running before. So this is what I would recommend doing first before you go out and buy another flywheel. I think the field service manual on these things says to just scuff it up with an emery cloth. So no need to replace the flywheel if there's no damage. Okay, so I pressed the the pilot bearing in just with a socket of the same size. Just tap, 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 pretty easy. Put the flywheel back on, torqued all the bolts down, and I also put some red Loctite on those bolts, because that's you do not want those coming out. Okay, notice the original one says flywheel side on this, and the raised side doesn't say anything. The new one on the raised side says TM side. But it doesn't say anything on the flywheel side. So this is the flywheel side. The raised side is not. So the raised side goes up underneath the pressure plate. You want to wipe down your surface with brake cleaner. Get all the oily residue. That is the last thing you want on that surface. You want to test your alignment tool. They come in different sizes. This one fits in the pilot bearing and also fits on the splines in the disc. With the disc correctly oriented, the thick side goes in toward the disc. We want to raise this up and bolt it. I will not show you that because it will take two hands. Okay, so once you get your pressure plate just kind of hand tight with those bolts, use this disc alignment tool, and when you push that in there into the pilot bearing, it'll make sure that that disc is centered. Once you have your disc centered, then you crisscross and tighten your clutch to the proper specifications. And you're going to do that, the clutch will eventually pressure plate seat against the flywheel. And then make sure you grease that spline up good. All right, that's enough for this video today. There is a catastrophic failure that I'm going to show you about. You can kind of see my eye is a little dark on this side, got a black eye. But you'll see that in a later video, so y'all have a great weekend.